I'm back with a video on Batman Arkham Origins 10 years later, which chronologically is a prequel in the Batman Arkham series. This actually was released in October of 2013. I could have easily reviewed it a couple months ago, but since this is set during Christmas Eve, why not review it in the month of December in vein of the Christmas holiday? I just played through the main storyline, including the DLC, Cold Cold Heart with Mr. Freeze, so we're gonna go full-on spoilers in case if you somehow don't know what the game's about, or if you don't care about spoilers. Ball's in your court. I've said it before in some of my other videos. I talked about Arkham City a couple of years ago, but I really like the Arkham series. Besides the recent Spider-Man games from Insomniac, this series is the quintessential comic book video game series. A lot of people don't really talk about Origins that much. Whenever the Arkham series comes up in conversation, it's usually forgotten about. They call it the Arkham Trilogy. I feel like the general consensus around it is that it's fine, but forgettable. And I kind of understand why people would say that, but I think from a story perspective, this game is actually quite amazing. I remember back in 2013 seeing all the updates that were coming out from various news outlets, ones that covered entertainment anyway. Having really liked Arkham Asylum and loving Arkham City, I was naturally excited to see what they would do with a prequel. But certain things were causing people to take a step back. There was a different developer involved, WB Games Montreal instead of Rocksteady, which produced the main 3 games in the series. I know some people were going, I don't know about this. And when the E3 trailer was released, that I think calmed a lot of people's nerves. Well, at least for me it did. It felt like the Arkham games that we all remembered. So when it came out, the reviews were pretty decent or lukewarm at best, I guess. IGN said it was fine, but not amazing. But the trailers I found to be pretty promising. We had some new villains showing up, like Deathstroke and Black Mask, and they do have a presence in the game, although the trailers were very misleading in hindsight, but we'll get to that. So going in, I thought that this game was mostly going to be centered around Black Mask and Deathstroke, giving us a little bit of a break from the Joker, even though they do show the Joker in one of the trailers. I thought maybe they would introduce him later in the game to show you what kind of a big presence he's going to have, knowing how much of an impact he's had on Batman. But no, he actually turns out to be the main force of opposition. Again, I'm trying to save it for later, but as far as my experience with the overall game, I would say it's a pretty solid entry in the series. The gameplay mechanics, unfortunately, is where I tend to draw back. Generally speaking, it's more or less the same as what you saw before. Combos, counters, you can upgrade your tech as you earn more points by fighting thugs on the street, or if you achieve certain goals, you can earn more points, and you're unable to unlock certain things in your arsenal. One little change that they make along the way is that when you go into detective vision, I think in the previous games you have to push L2, in this one you have to push L1. So whenever I go from one game to the other in the series, if I'm doing some kind of a marathon of some kind, I have to remind myself, no, it's this button, not that button. In terms of the scope, compared to what came before, the game is somewhat bigger, but not too big. Arkham Knight, I think, really takes the cake on that one. And the game introduces a couple of unique things in the series that weren't there before. You're able to recreate a crime scene when you come across a certain area, some of which does play a part in the main storyline, but then there's also other case files that pop up. Let's say you're flying around the certain areas of the city, you'll hear a cop's voice out of nowhere say, "Dispatch, we have a dead body on the Bowery, I need additional units ASAP." And when you use the crime scene recreation, you could rewind it with L2 or fast forward with R2, and you have to look for certain things, like a red line as you're moving through the play-by-play. It leads you to a certain clue which helps you solve the crime. And this aspect is brought into Arkham Knight when Batman has to find Barbara Gordon when she's taken by the Arkham Knight. And they even use this similar thing in the recent Spider-Man game from Insomniac when Miles Morales has to find Black Cat before he tracks her down to Doctor Strange's mansion. Not calling it a negative at all, because even Insomniac could recognize some of the good that came from this one. Another thing that they add is the fast travel element, where you have to highlight a certain area on the map and click fast travel, and Batman goes up into his Batwing, and a cutscene ensues, rappels up into the sky, into the Batwing, he's flying around, and then it shows him diving down, and then you're back in the area that you want to be in. But in order to do that, you have to take down these towers that are controlled by a guy named Nigma. We all know who that's gonna be. But the first time I played this game back in the day, my reaction more or less was this.
Well, if it isn't the King Thug himself. Figured it was only a matter of time before you showed up.
Figures.
Sorry about them.
That's one example among many things where they show the tie-ins to the rest of the series, because they have an area of the city that's never been explored at this point anyway in the games. But then you go into these other areas which we've seen before in Arkham City, which actually does turn out to be Arkham City chronologically in the future. When I was first playing the game and I found myself gliding into a certain area where you see Wonder Tower, I remember thinking to myself, oh my god, that's gonna be this later. Oh wow, that's the Penguin's headquarters in Arkham City. Oh, that's the courthouse where Two-Face is hanging out at. Not that that really matters, but it is kind of neat to see that stuff. That being said, the most obnoxious thing as far as gameplay goes is flying across that bridge. We're using the grapnel boost, which I'm glad that the developer said, we don't need you to earn the grapnel boost. Here it is. But flying across that bridge is so freaking obnoxious. And this happens a lot throughout the game as I was playing it again. Certain areas where you know you can use the grapnel boost to fire to, and nothing happens. This bridge is so awful with that. Having mentioned Nigma earlier, there's all these data packs spread throughout the city, just like the Riddler trophies. Now in this case, you collect enough data packs, you're able to collect certain types of information on the certain characters in the game. But my personal favorites are with the Penguin, because I just love hearing that guy's accent.
Now what would Roman want with that lot, I wonder? I think it's time we keep an eye on our friend Black Mask.
The data packs aren't really that hard to figure out, in a way, I guess. As opposed to Arkham City, which makes you feel like you have to earn it. There's not really much of a challenge here on that front. There are a few times where it is kind of hard to figure out. A few times I have to go, alright, how do I... Okay, it's like this. The most annoying place to find the data packs are in the Gotham Royal Hotel and on the bridge, well, the inside of the bridge. Also, the counter moves that you have to use on the thugs when you're fighting somebody else as somebody comes up from behind and those lightning bolt things pop up. Sometimes, depending on what difficulty you're in, or even on the easy difficulty, I feel like that part is so obnoxious because no matter how many times you try to do a ground takedown, that other person on the other side of the group will run right over so fast just to screw that move up. It's not a deal breaker for me, but it does make me go, oh, God, will you just get away from me? But when it comes to the story of Batman Arkham Origins, this takes place about 8 years before the events of Arkham Asylum. Bruce Wayne's in his second year of crime fighting, Gordon's not the commissioner yet, Alfred's not really entirely supportive of Bruce Wayne's crime fighting endeavors, and Batman is viewed as a mystery in the eyes of the public. Nobody knows whether or not he's real. But Black Mask, Roman Sionis, puts a bounty on Batman's head, $50 million, hiring all these assassins to come into the city and take down the Batman for $50 million. The establishment of Batman's character I really like, because whenever he shows up in the prison, when the prison riot breaks out, he manages to save the warden, who's really shocked by his appearance, saying, wait, I didn't think you were real. I heard all the rumors, but I didn't believe any of it. Then as Batman makes his way through the prison, he sees Roman Sionis kill Commissioner Loeb, who he initially had on his payroll. Then he runs into Killer Croc, giving us our first boss battle, which the boss battles are kind of hit and miss as far as the difficulty level. They are very challenging, even on the easy difficulty, but the hardest one is the final fight between Batman and Bane in the prison. Oh, don't get me started on that one. Batman manages to defeat Killer Croc while also learning about the assassination plot, and we see Batman's relationship with Alfred, which clearly displays some tension. Alfred cares about Bruce like he's his own child, but at this point in the series, he's not very accepting or approving of what Batman is doing. Especially when Batman takes off to Blackgate Prison, the friction is clearly on display there.
You do realize it is Christmas Eve, sir?
Oh, he knows. He doesn't care. He's got a job to do. As opposed to Kevin Conroy, it's Roger Craig Smith this time around. Portrays a younger version of this universe's Batman. Obviously, I prefer Kevin Conroy as the voice of Batman in a voiceover role, but Roger Craig Smith, I think, is really, really great as this version of the character. In a lot of ways, he does sound like Kevin Conroy, while also not copying off of him, particularly when he gets really mad, or when he has that argument with Alfred, who tries to tell him not to go through with what he's about to do, fighting these assassins.
When the mugger or the thief stops to think twice, that is fear. That is what I am. That is why they hired assassins, because I am the reason the criminals breathe easier when the sun rises. So no, Alfred, I am not in over my head. Tonight will not be my end, but it will be theirs.
Probably one of my favorite lines from Batman in any piece of media that I've seen him from. In fact, around the time this game came out, Roger Craig Smith actually appeared on the Schmoes Know podcast. He actually said those lines, and one of the people in the recording studio was getting all giddy since she was a big Batman fan.
Oh, that is fear. That is why they hired assassins. I am the reason the criminals breathe easier when the sun rises. Tonight will not be my end, but it will be theirs.
So good.
Wow.
So good.
And he also talked about how he was able to figure out what he was signing up for, what he was auditioning for, because he's good friends with Troy Baker, supposedly.
The first initial auditions, we didn't know what we were auditioning for.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Troy talked about the fact that he went in, he's such a huge fan of Batman that he recognized some of the dialogue from like The Killing Joke and Year One and right off the bat, and he was like, wait a second.
So Batman goes around to find out what exactly Black Mask is up to with these assassins. We also get some really great scenes and moments with Batman as he's trying to figure out how to be a better crime fighter, how to be a very imposing presence to criminals in the city. When he comes across Ricky Loose Lips LeBlanc, who is one of the main henchmen for the Penguin, hanging him upside down from a bell outside the Merchant's Bank, which I would assume is probably a small nod to Batman hanging flasks from a fire escape in Batman Begins. And he drops him right into the Christmas tree.
You're crazy! You're freaking crazy!
Eventually he makes his way to the final offer where the Penguin's hiding, where we get another big boss fight with Slade Wilson, Deathstroke. Besides the Arrow TV show, this was my main introduction to the character, and this is who I actually think of when Deathstroke comes to mind. I know Joe Manganiello made an appearance as Deathstroke in one of the later DC films. I think it was the Snyder Cut for the Justice League. I don't remember, but I'm still waiting for a proper portrayal of Slade Wilson in live action. I mean, I guess the closest to that proper portrayal I'll get is in the Arrow TV series. Hey, I'll take what I can get. As far as I'm concerned, this is who I think of as Deathstroke. The fight is actually really fun, but very challenging. When he uses the big pole against you or the knife, you gotta time the counter exactly right, otherwise he'll cut you up or bang you around. Just when you counter his move once, another opening will pop up and you gotta do it again. Every time I play this, I'm literally going like this, trying to watch his every move, because the AI in this game, as far as the boss fights, incredible. It's very, very hard to lock down. Unfortunately, this is the only time Batman and Deathstroke have a scene together, in this game anyway. Well, they have a moment later on towards the finale, but I was kind of bummed that we didn't get more fight scenes between the two of them. He shows up in Arkham Knight, just where you think we might actually have a really big boss fight. We'll save that for another time though, but I was kind of hoping that we'd get more of that at least. I wanted more Deathstroke, to be honest with you. There are some villains that Batman does get a good fight from, but Deathstroke, yeah, no, he's definitely the one who gives the Dark Knight a run for its money. Throughout this section of the game where you're navigating the final offer, we see that the Penguin is interrogating Alberto Falcone, who is the son of Carmine Falcone, or Falcone, depending on which one you prefer. There's one section in here where you have to sneak around to save one of the Falcone's henchmen, and they have a reference to The Godfather.
But if you're the playing type, maybe you should shut your mouth and pray your boss tells my boss what he wants to know. Else both of yous are gonna be, what do you guys say? Swimming
with the fishes? Oh, that's original. You think of that yourself, you low-class
warning you, one more word.
But interrogating the Penguin, he finds out there was a murder at Lacey Towers, where afterwards Batman goes to investigate, and then he sees that something unusual is happening here. Circling through the various areas where you use the crime scene recreation, we learn that Roman and his girlfriend Tiffany were hiding from someone called the Joker. But in order to learn exactly what fully happened, Batman has to sneak into the GCPD and access the National Criminal Database because he can't use a DNA analysis in the field. And certain other things pop up along the way as we go through the main story. We run into Anarchy, who's planted all these bombs across the city, and Mad Hatter, voiced by Peter McNichol from Ally McBeal. These are optional side missions you can go on, but the way they introduced Mad Hatter really threw me for a loop at first until I realized how these thugs were singing the invitation song to him. That's when I realized, wait a minute. It's the Mad Hatter. He induces a hallucination into you and you have to navigate your way through to find the girl that he's captured. Or kidnapped. Very gothic looking type of environment, and it does make me wonder if this was a nod to the Tim Burton Batman. I mean, Tim Burton made the Alice in Wonderland movie some time ago. This series does in their own ways, I think, make nods to the various portrayals of Batman, so I can't help but wonder if that was intentional. I'm going to say yes. Now, I don't know how the Mad Hatter is portrayed in other areas of the Batman mythos, but the way he says certain things or recites certain words doesn't really strike me as incorrect. Peter McNichol's voice acting as the character, almost unrecognizable. I sometimes find myself going, wait, that's the guy from Ghostbusters 2? Okay. Then there's the Anarchy side mission, where it's this young kid who's a anarchist, if that name doesn't give it away, plants all these various bombs across the city with the GCPD, the bank, and some other place I can't remember, who very much wants to destroy all the things that he sees wrong with the city. A completely understandable motivation, but unless you're a completely twisted individual who doesn't care about humanity, I don't think anybody in their right mind would condone the way he wants to carry that out. As you sneak through the GCPD trying to get to the criminal database server, we run into various cops like Lieutenant Brandon, who is the poster child of all the corruption in the GCPD, and then Commissioner Gordon, Captain Gordon. He's not the commissioner yet at this point in the series. Gordon represents everything that's supposed to be good about the GCPD, who is aware of the corruption but isn't exactly ready to face the truth, as it's shown by his arguments with his daughter Barbara, who later turns out to be an ally for Batman later in the future as Batgirl, and then later as Oracle. We see their first encounter when he goes right into the comms room, and he notices how very knowledgeable she is, and through another side mission, she recruits him to destroy all these stashes that the SWAT guys are letting these street thugs get their hands on. The little foundations that they throw in this game are actually really, really neat, knowing exactly how the rest of the series plays out, especially in light of Arkham Knight. And Barbara's question of why do you do what you do is an important payoff when Batman has his encounter with the Joker in the hotel, showing his post-traumatic stress over the death of his parents. Not exactly new, and I know some people are probably tired of seeing the reminder of Bruce Wayne's parents being murdered. I would probably agree with you, yeah. Once again, we have to be reminded of why Bruce Wayne became Batman in the first place. But Batman's able to sneak into the server room where the criminal database is, and he explains to Alfred what happened during that supposed murder. Sionis used a decoy to sneak into his penthouse, his girlfriend Tiffany was taking shelter when she got ambushed by the assailant, and certain things happened where Sionis got the drop on the guy, but the one assailant that we don't really get a name for turns out to be the Joker, the shadow that Batman's been chasing. And the little subtle clue of the way the Joker looks just briefly flashes right here. I love that little detail because we all know who the Joker is, obviously, but just when he figures out who it is, I get shivers every time. Eventually, when he goes to the bank and he's able to find the Joker, who's actually disguised as Roman Sionis, he was using Roman to access his bank account and take over his operations. And the reveal of the Joker being disguised as Black Mask, the way he turns around and you hear the Christmas bells music playing.
This whole time, you hired the assassins. You've been running Sionis' operation.
Well, technically it's my operation now.
What a great reveal. One moment that I really like is when Batman interrogates the one Joker thug who surrenders, and he tells Alfred what the Joker's deal is.
He's the one who hired the assassins.
And it must be he who ordered the bombing of the GCPD. Oh, dear Lord, shouldn't you think about letting the police handle this one?
Not a chance. He's mine.
And so, the obsession begins. But literally right after that, when you go out into the street, you fall into a trap set by Shiva, one of the assassins, who tries to test his moral code to see if he can save somebody in time, whether or not they are corrupt. And he disagrees with her methods of killing them. And at first I didn't really know exactly what her deal was, but then I realized over time as I played it again and again, she's basically the introduction for Batman with the League of Assassins. Her master is actually Ra's al Ghul. They don't explicitly name Ra's al Ghul, but if you're someone who knows the Batman comics well enough, you're probably going to pick up on subtle hints, especially with the audio tapes once you collect enough data packs. When she has a conversation with Bane about the Master, I don't think it's really a shock who the Master is. Oh, I didn't even talk about the Electrocutioner. Lester Buczynski, who uses the shock gloves as a way to fight his opponents. It's supposedly one of the next big boss fights that you have to go through before you fight Deathstroke, but they use it as a big fake out where Batman knocks him out in one punch. Remember at the time thinking, okay, how am I gonna fight this guy? But when I push the square button and it shows the cutscene of him being knocked out cold,
Who wants to show me where the Penguin is?
well, that's a relief. So Batman makes his way to the Sionis steel mill, where the Joker is now taken over. But as it turns out, the Joker's not there. Roman Sionis is being held hostage by his former allies, the Joker's men. Copperhead gets the drop on him and poisons him, Batman. And we see some images of his fears coming out of him, where he fears that Alfred's disappointed in him, the guilt he feels over not being able to save Commissioner Loeb. That boss fight is probably one of, if not the hardest boss fights in this game. The multiple Copperheads that pop up around you, it's almost like the illusions created by Mysterio. You see all these multiple versions of Mysterio and you're not exactly sure who it is. You hit her enough times, then you realize, okay, that's her. Once Batman defeats Copperhead, he's able to figure out where the Joker's hiding, tracking him down to the Gotham Royal Hotel where he's meeting up with all the assassins. And in a very chill-inducing moment, he throws the Electrocutioner out the window to his death in the lobby. This fruitcake is fantastic! And while we're on that subject, let's talk about Troy Baker as the Joker. Well, yeah, okay, it's really easy to get upset over the Joker's prominence in this game because we were led to believe that it was going to be other villains, and it's really easy to fall back on the Joker because he is the arch nemesis of Batman. But seeing the start of the hero-villain relationship between the two, I found it to be very enthralling, in particular from a storytelling and character perspective. There's not a whole lot of interaction between Batman and the Joker in this one. There's a couple of moments where they talk with each other, but it's in vain of the genesis of that relationship, where they're just learning about each other. Where Batman, as he's going through the Gotham Royal Hotel and he sees all these various things that he set up throughout the buildings, Batman continuously gets to be more and more disturbed by what he sees, especially when he sounds really shaken during one of his talks with Alfred in the hotel through his intercom. I have never fought anybody like this before. And in that way, now that I think about it, it's very similar to The Dark Knight, where Bruce Wayne is trying to figure out what the Joker's deal is, and Alfred tells him, Bruce, maybe this is somebody that you don't really understand. Of all the guys that he's fought, various gangsters and mobsters and certain types of supervillains that he might have come across along the way, the Joker is a very, very different type of villain that he's ever fought. And it actually shakes him to his core when he realizes that he wasn't prepared for this. And we get quite a few moments where you could see that it's clearly messing with his head. When he saves the Joker from falling to his death after his first encounter with Bane. And also to rewind a little bit, when the Joker blows up that building.
It's a tradition in my house to open one present each on Christmas Eve. How about this one?
doesn't get any more sadistic than that. Can we just acknowledge Troy Baker's performance in this game? Oh my god. It's really easy for me to ogle over this guy because he is one of my all-time favorite voice actors or actors in general. And I did meet him at Comic-Con a long time ago, the same one that I met Mark Hamill at in New York City. But he really is a standout here. Obviously, it's not Mark Hamill's Joker, but this is the same character in this continuity anyway. There are a couple times throughout this game whenever he inflects or enunciates certain words that I think, are you sure that's not Mark Hamill? And for this game in particular, he got nominated for Best Vocal Performance. And there's even a video that you can find somewhere on YouTube where he reads the famous monologue from Batman the Killing Joke.
There's always madness. You can just step outside and close the door, and all those dreadful things that happened, you can lock them away. Madness is the emergency exit.
If I could somehow get a one-on-one with him and just talk to him and get to know him and see what his secret sauce is about voice acting, count me in. I want in. But after that, the Joker's arrested by the GCPD. One of the arresting officers, Harvey Bullock, voiced by Robert Costanzo from the 90s animated series, asks him where his partner went. Joker initially laughs at that, but then he realizes, wait a minute, why did he save me? And the admiration he has for Batman starts to blossom. When he ends up at Blackgate Prison, he gets a visit from the psychologist, who turns out to be Harleen Quinzel. We all know who that's gonna be. Is it actually the same actress from the other games? Yes, it is. Except for Origins, it was a different actress. I still remember the first time I played this, when I heard her voice as she came in, I thought, oh my god, that's Harley Quinn! That's Harley Quinn! And then the Joker goes on this very insightful and harsh but understandable monologue on how there's nothing crueler than memory.
There's nothing so cruel as memory. The pointy, biting little thunderbolts, unwanted party crashers screaming through your synapses. Inescapable, unrelenting, not at all friendly. You can't even escape into madness.
Seeing this insight on the Joker, I could be wrong. I haven't really read much Batman comics, to be honest with you. I am a fan of the character, but when it comes to comics, I don't really know a whole ton. I don't really recall seeing that much in other portrayals of the character. This, I think, is probably the game's strongest point, seeing the character depth of the Joker and Batman at this point in the series. And with all the gameplay issues that I have with it, especially how buggy the mechanics are when the certain loading screen is happening and you gotta wait for it to load and save the data, this stuff really elevates the game for me. He doesn't mention Batman by name, but Harleen thinks that he, the Joker, is talking about her when he's actually not. Again, another thing in this game which shows the beginning of the relationship between certain characters. So Batman gets a lead on Bane and manages to track him down into his underground hideout, where he learns that Bane has discovered his secret identity. Another strong point in this game is the portrayal of Bane. I mean, besides Tom Hardy's portrayal in Dark Knight Rises, this is probably my favorite version of the character. Obviously, he's really big and strong from taking a few mega vitamins. They still retain his intelligence in here. And he's also really visceral and scary. The way he is able to see that Batman is hanging on top of the elevator and just pulls him right through the ceiling and smacks him around the walls a few times. If I were anywhere near that guy, I'd say, okay, I'll do whatever you want. Just don't hurt me, please. Do they even have manners where he comes from? So Batman takes off, destroying all the evidence that Bane has, but then hears that the Firefly is taking hostages on the bridge. And this is where Batman actually starts to slowly develop the partnership between him and Jim Gordon, leading us to another boss fight between him and Firefly, which is rather obnoxious and kind of challenging because you gotta throw all these glue grenades and then hit him with the batarang and pull him down with the grapnel, all the while he's firing his flamethrower at you. Especially when all the other thugs come in and try to throw you off. I don't like it when that happens. I mean, I get that the game is trying to give you some kind of a challenge, but still, it's like, can we just focus on the one person I'm trying to fight right now? Maybe have a thug show up every now and then, but don't throw like 15 guys in there all at once. That's just overkill. It's even worse than the final fight between Bane and Batman in the prison. Good God. Although, whenever Bane launches his Hulk smash-like attack, knocking everybody out, and then when he charges through everybody, that does kind of take some of the heat off of you, thankfully. So Batman defeats Firefly and is on his way back to the Batcave, but learns that Bane has managed to sneak into there, causing a lot of harm to Alfred.
I have left enough life in him for some final words. If you hurry. Alfred!
Video games usually don't have this kind of effect on me, save for a few like The Last of Us or the Insomniac Spider-Man games. Arkham Origins is one of the few exceptions that actually gets an emotional response out of me. And it's here where Alfred is finally able to understand why Bruce is doing what he's doing, showing his support and saying, no, you can't go through this alone. So Batman makes his way to the prison, has this big boss fight with Bane, supposedly killing him with an electrical charge. Then we get the sequence where this is by far my least favorite part of the game. Not in a bad way, but when you have to sneak around Bane when he's going into full Bane Venom mode, trying to sneak right past him, get him to go into that electrical wall or bang his head into a wall, and you're on a time limit supposedly where you only have 10 minutes before he goes into full strength and he'll kill you with one punch. I kid you not, my adrenaline literally goes through the stratosphere every time I play this sequence. And by the time it's over and you defeat Bane for good, catharsis doesn't quite cover it. But it's also a big relief for Batman. They established earlier on in the game that prolonged use of the Venom causes the host to lose some of its memory permanently. And since Bane used a huge amount on himself this time, he knows who Batman is, but he completely forgot his identity. A little bit convenient on the game developer's part, but in vain of the rest of the series when you fight Bane a couple more times after that chronologically, it does make sense in terms of the overall story. Then you finally have your big confrontation with the Joker in the chapel. If you let certain moments go on a while, Joker has these various sayings that he says to Batman that we're actually not that different. Are you doing this for you or for me?
Directed at me, and for what? You know, if you'd actually let me finish a sentence, you might learn something! You might learn that we're not so different. You might learn something about yourself!
You need to learn to shut up.
But he manages to defeat the Joker without killing him, and Gordon starts to realize how good of a force of nature that Batman is for the city when he initially tries to bring him in, but then he decides to let him go, with the ending monologue of him talking to Barbara that maybe he can actually give the city something to believe in.
Maybe he can give them something to believe in.
Perfect Batman imagery. There's also a mid-credit scene that we get with Deathstroke receiving a visit from Amanda Waller about the Suicide Squad, which I guess ties into the Batman Assault on Arkham direct-to-video, or in this case Blu-ray release at the time. I never actually watched that, but anyone who is familiar with it, you can probably tell me if that's true or not. Now, as far as the DLC, Cold Cold Heart, it takes place right after the main events of Arkham Origins on New Year's Eve, where we're introduced to Mr. Freeze, who kidnaps Ferris Boyle, the main guy in charge of GothCorp. Bruce manages to track down Mr. Freeze and learn that he's trying to save his dying wife. Not a whole lot of story happens in this DLC. It's very much in vein of what we saw in the Heart of Ice episode in the 90s Batman show. Plays out a little bit differently than it does there, but it's more or less a faithful recreation, and any fans of the Batman 90s show will get a lot out of this, especially this line, which is a reference to what he also says in that same episode.
Take a seat, humanitarian.
Good night, humanitarian.
And for anyone who doesn't know, Mr. Freeze is actually my favorite Batman villain. Besides the Joker, obviously, because of the whole tragic backstory of him trying to save his wife Nora. One last note about the DLC. I really like hearing Vicky Vale's broadcast where she talks about Jim Gordon becoming the commissioner, seeing the little tie-ins to Arkham Asylum with Mayor Quincy Sharp coming into the picture, and all the people giving their various opinions on the Batman. Really eerie, but also very heroic and hopeful at the same time. And I actually used some of that audio for a fan video I made some time ago with Robert Pattinson's Batman. Not patting myself on the back or anything, but if you're curious, you're more than welcome to give it a watch. So all in all, Batman Arkham Origins, I would say, is a really solid entry in the series. Not the best, obviously. It's really easy to say Arkham Asylum and Arkham City are the best in the 4 Batman Arkham games. But as far as story and characters, I would say this, along with Batman Arkham Knight, are top tier. I mean, gameplay goes to the other 2 games and maybe even Arkham Knight, but Origins in particular, along with Knight, probably some of the best storytelling that I've ever seen as far as the Batman character, and seeing how it really dives deep into the psychology of Bruce Wayne. Anyone who's a fan of really fun video games, especially a Batman video game, you may or may not get a lot out of this. I know there's other multiplayer stuff, and I guess Robin does make an appearance in this game as far as the outside material, and to be honest, I don't really care for multiplayer. If some people like it, hey, that's all well and good, but for me, it's just added fluff for a video game, so I don't really get too excited about that stuff. And especially since it's set around Christmas time, this is a must-play for me every single December since then. So those are my thoughts on Batman Arkham Origins. What are your thoughts on this game if you played it? Comment below and tell me what they are. Stay tuned for more videos coming up soon, and as always, see you in the next one.